So as you already know, this event is called A Season of Darkness and Light. So we'll be talking about several different holidays in the course of this evening. And the first one, I put them in order by the day they fall on the calendar. And obviously there are many holidays throughout the year, but the ones that we've chosen to focus on for this event are the ones that are somehow talking about this season of light and darkness, the coming of the light, or the, waiting in the darkness for the light, or various things like that. So Diwali is the first holiday I wanted to talk about, and it's a 5-day celebration that's observed every year in early autumn, after the conclusion of the summer harvest. And it coincides with the new moon, and it's deemed the darkest night of the Hindu lunisolar calendar. So this term, Diwali, comes from the combination of two terms. One is Avali, which refers to the row of clay lamps that Indians light at this time of year, mostly at this time of year. Well, maybe they might light them year round, but they're very prominent in this holiday. And then the other word, Deepa, which means the lamp. So Avali is the row, Deepa is the lamp. And so it's associated, this holiday, with the goddess Lakshmi and the god Ganesha. So Lakshmi, who is the wife of Vishnu, is the goddess of prosperity, and Ganesha is the god of wisdom and remover of obstacles. And so devotees of those two figures prepare for the holiday by cleaning, renovating, and decorating their homes and workplaces with diyas, oil lamps, and rangolis, which are colorful art circle patterns. And people typically wear their finest clothes and illuminate the interiors and exteriors of their homes with lamps. Diwali has also historically been described by numerous travelers from outside India. In his, for example, in his 11th century memoir on India, the Persian traveler and historian Al-Biruni wrote of Diwali being celebrated by Hindus on the day of the new moon in the month of Kartika. And the Venetian merchant and traveler Niccolo di Conti visited India in the early 15th century. And in his memoir, he wrote, "On another of these festivals, they fix up within their temples and on the outside of the roofs an innumerable number of oil lamps, which are kept burning day and night." And he also mentioned that the families would gather, clothe themselves in new garments, sing, dance, and feast. So I want to just say a prayer for Diwali that is often used, and it goes like this. Om Jai Lakshmi, goddess born from the struggle between good and evil, guide us toward the light. In a world where plenty is possible, let us end hunger, thirst, and homelessness. In your nurturing hands, let us seek refuge from want, fear, and violence. With your grace, let our world be reborn in your image, where all needs are met, where morality and love are abundant, and whereby we are free. Om Jai Lakshmi, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti. The next holiday is Advent, which is a season of days between December 3rd and the 24th. And according to Christianity.com, the word Advent is derived from the Latin word adventus, which means coming. And that also translates in the Greek to the word parousia. So scholars believe that during the 4th and 5th centuries in Spain and Gaul, what is now France, Advent was a season of preparation for the baptism of new Christians at the January feast of Epiphany, which is the celebration of God's incarnation, but through the event of the visit of the Magi to the baby Jesus. Also looking at his baptism in the Jordan River by John the Baptist and his first miracle at Cana. So originally, Advent didn't have anything to do with Christmas. But it was a season of preparation where Christians would spend 40 days in penance, prayer, and fasting to prepare for this baptismal celebration. But by the 6th century, then, Roman Christians had tied Advent to the coming of Christ, but more to the second coming, not the birth in Bethlehem, but to the second coming, where they saw Jesus returning in the clouds as the judge of the world. And it wasn't until the Middle Ages that the Advent season was then explicitly linked to Christ's first coming at Christmas. So Advent symbolizes the situation of the church in these last days, or seen as these last days, as God's people wait for the return of Christ in glory to consummate his eternal kingdom. And this situation for the church is seen as similar to the situation for Israel at the end of the Hebrew Bible, where Israel was in exile, waiting and hoping in prayerful expectation for the coming of the Messiah. So whereas Israel looked back to God's past gracious actions on their behalf and then forward to a Messiah, in a similar way, the church looks back to Christ's birth in Bethlehem while looking forward in anticipation to a return in what Christians call the second coming. And so the first verse of the Christian hymn, O come, Emmanuel, kind of captures that idea when it says, O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appears. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. And so a common tradition in Advent is to make and light an Advent wreath. And the Advent wreath tradition began in northern Germany and can be traced to the 19th century, where a Lutheran theologian and pastor named Johann Hinrich Wickern ran an orphanage in Hamburg for children and other, young people without parents. And so, of course, as you can imagine, in an orphanage, Christmas was a very important season for them, for the children especially. And so they would ask the pastor every day, when is Christmas? When is Christmas? And so in order to make their waiting easier, he created the world's first Advent or Christmas wreath, but it was very different from the ones we have today. In his case, he took a wooden carriage wheel and attached candles to it. So he had 4 large white candles that represented the 4 Sundays in Advent, and then 19 small red candles for the other weekdays. And so he hung this wagon wheel with probably chains from the ceiling in the prayer room, and then lit a candle each day of the Advent season. And so in this way, the children learned to count and also knew how many days they still had to wait until Christmas Eve. But eventually, people began making the wreaths out of evergreens as a symbol of everlasting life in the midst of winter and death. And of course, the circle also symbolizes God's unending love and the eternal life God makes possible. And then again, Advent candles are put in the wreath and other things, sometimes like holly and berries. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was killed by the Nazis just days before the liberation of the concentration camps, said, the celebration of Advent is possible only to those who are troubled in soul, who know themselves to be poor and imperfect, and who look forward to something greater to come. Also, in a similar time period, we usually have Hanukkah. So this year begins December 7th and goes to December 15th. Hanukkah is an 8-day Jewish celebration that commemorates the rededication during the 2nd century before the Common Era of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, where, according to legend, Jews had risen up against their Greek Syrian oppressors in the Maccabean revolt. Hanukkah, which means dedication in Hebrew, begins on the 25th of Kislev on the Hebrew calendar and usually falls in November or December. It's often called the Festival of Lights, and it's celebrated with the lighting of the menorah, which you see pictured in that top image. Well, actually in both images. And also traditional foods and games and gifts. The events that inspired this holiday took place during a very turbulent phase of Jewish history. Around 200 before the Common Era, Judea, also known as the land of Israel, came under the control of Antiochus III, who was the king of Syria. And he allowed Jews who lived there to continue practicing their religion, but his son was less benevolent. And so he outlawed the Jewish religion and ordered the Jews to worship Greek gods. So in 168 BCE, his soldiers descended upon Jerusalem and massacred thousands of people, desecrating the city's holy second temple by erecting an altar to Zeus and sacrificing pigs within its sacred walls. So led by the Jewish priest Mattathias and his 5 sons, a large-scale rebellion broke out against Antiochus and his monarchy. And when Mattathias died in 166, his son Judah, also known as Judah Maccabee, the Hammer, took the helm, and within 2 years, the Jews had driven the Syrians out of Jerusalem, and relying mostly on guerrilla warfare tactics, Judah called on his followers to cleanse the second temple, rebuild its altar, and light its menorah, the gold candelabrum whose 7 branches represented knowledge and creation and were meant to be kept burning every night. So according to the Talmud, one of Judaism's most central texts, Judah Maccabee and the other Jews who were part of this rededication of the second temple believed they witnessed a miracle, because originally there was only enough untainted olive oil to keep the menorah's candles burning for a single day, but they continued to burn for 8 nights, giving them enough time to find a fresh supply. And so that what was the inspiration for this yearly 8-day festival. And like I said, it revolves around the lighting of the candles on the menorah, and families will observe the holidays by reciting blessings, displaying the menorah, maybe in a window, as a reminder to others of the miracle that inspired the holiday. And then there's also traditional foods that are often fried in oil, like potato pancakes, which I love, also known as latkes. Jam-filled donuts are very popular. And there's customs like playing with the 4-sided spinning tops called dreidels, and also the exchange of gifts. So Hanukkah became very popular and more popular commercially, typically because it falls right near Christmas. From a religious perspective, though, it's a relatively minor holiday. It's not nearly as important in the Jewish tradition as Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. So there are typically 3 blessings said as the candles are lit. And in Hebrew, I'll try my best to say this, but the first of those blessings goes like this: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kudshanu mitzvotav this is where it gets hard, v'tisvanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah, which in English means, praised are you, our God, ruler of the universe, who made us holy through your commandments and commanded us to kindle the Hanukkah lights. Next, we have St. Lucia Day, December 13th, which is a day to commemorate, again, this is a Christian holiday, to commemorate Lucia of Syracuse, a martyr who, according to legend, brought food and aid to Christians who were hiding in the Roman catacombs, and she did that wearing a candle-lit wreath on her head to light her way, to leave her hands free to carry as much food as she could. So her feast day, which coincided with the shortest day of the year prior to calendar reforms that were made, it's widely celebrated as a festival of light. And so it falls now within the Advent season, and it's also called St. Lucy's Day. And it's kind of seen as a precursor of Christmas. And it again points to the arrival of the light of Christ in the calendar on Christmas Day. So in Scandinavian countries, each town elects its own St. Lucia. And the festival begins with a procession led by the St. Lucia designee, in which you can kind of see in that top picture, who is followed by other young girls dressed in white and who also wear lighted wreaths on their heads, and boys dressed in white pajama-like costumes singing traditional songs. So this festival marks the beginning of the Christmas season in Scandinavia, and it's meant to bring hope and light during the darkest time of the year. And schools will generally close around noon on the day of the festival so that families can prepare for the holiday. And so families typically observe the holiday in their homes by having one of their daughters, traditionally the eldest, dress in white and serve coffee and baked goods, such as saffron bread and ginger biscuits to the other members of the family. So I guess that looks like the saffron bread there. It's pretty yellow, which I would love to taste that. I pretty much like anything that's bread, even though I'm not supposed to eat it. But these are very traditional foods that are also given to visitors on this day. So in earlier centuries, the Norse people celebrated the winter solstice with large bonfires, which were meant to scare off evil spirits and alter the course of the sun. But after converting to Christianity sometime around the year 1000, the Norse then incorporated this legend of St. Lucia into their celebration. So this modern festival of light combines elements of both pagan and Christian traditions. Now, there's also a very special devotion to St. Lucy that's practiced in the Italian regions of Lombardy, Emilia-Romagna, Veneto, Friuli, Venezia, Giulia, Trentino, Alto Adige in the north of the country, and Sicily in the south, as well as in the Croatian coastal region of Dalmatia. In Hungary and Croatia, a popular tradition on St. Lucy's Day involves planting wheat grains that grow to be several centimeters tall by Christmas Day, which in their tradition represents the nativity of Jesus. So St. Lucy is one of the very few saints still celebrated by the overwhelmingly Lutheran Nordic people, and also so like Danes, Swedes, Finns, and Norwegians. And it's also therefore celebrated in the US and Canada. Let's see. And some of the practices associated with the Feast of St. Lucy may predate the adoption of Christianity in these regions. And like much of Scandinavian folklore and even religiosity, it's again centered on the annual struggle between light and darkness. So, of course, we can imagine people who were observing the darkness growing and growing and growing, were looking with hope toward the time when daylight would begin to be more hours of the day again. And so the Nordic observation of St. Lucy is first attested in the Middle Ages and continued after the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s, although the modern celebration of St. Lucy's Day is really only about 200 years old. Let's see. And she is known as the patron saint of the visually impaired. So here's an example of a prayer to St. Lucy. Saint Lucy, whose beautiful name signifies light, by the light of faith which God bestowed upon you, increase and preserve his light in my soul, so that I may avoid evil and be zealous in the performance of good works, and detest nothing so much as the blindness and the darkness of evil and sin. Obtain for me by your intercession with God perfect vision for my bodily eyes, and the grace to use them for God's greater honor and glory and the salvation of souls. Saint Lucy, Virgin and Martyr, hear my prayers and obtain my petitions. Amen. Next, we have winter solstice. Now, as I mentioned, I guess in the past, St. Lucy's Day used to fall on the shortest day of the year, but then I guess there was a change to the calendars. So winter solstice is the shortest day of the year, shortest daylight day of the year. So the solstice may have been a special moment of the annual cycle for some cultures, even during Neolithic times. And astronomical events were often used to guide activities such as the mating of animals, the sowing of crops, the monitoring of winter reserves of food. And so many cultural mythologies and traditions are derived from this. And this kind of thing is attested to by the physical remains in the layouts of late Neolithic and Bronze Age archaeological sites, such as Stonehenge in England and Newgrange in Ireland. And the primary axes of both of these monuments seem to have been carefully aligned on a sight line pointing to the winter solstice sunrise, which is the case for Newgrange, and the winter solstice sunset, which is true in Stonehenge. So it's significant that at Stonehenge, the great trilithon was oriented outwards from the middle of the monument, meaning that its smooth, flat face was turned toward the midwinter sun. So the winter solstice was immensely important because the people were, economically and just physically dependent on knowing the progress of the seasons. So starvation was common during the first months of the winter, like January to April in the northern hemisphere, or July to October in the southern hemisphere. So this period was known as the famine months. And so in temperate climates, the midwinter festival was the last feast celebration before deep winter began. And so most cattle were slaughtered at that time so that they wouldn't have to be fed during the winter. So that was also the time of year when there was a plentiful supply of fresh meat. And so the majority of wine and beer made during the year was also then fermented and ready for drinking at this time of year. So because this event was seen as the reversal of the sun's ebbing presence in the sky, concepts of the birth or rebirth of the sun gods have been common. And so in cultures which use cyclic calendars based on the winter solstice, the year as reborn was celebrated with reference to life, death, rebirth deities or new beginnings, such as Hogmanay's Redding, a New Year cleaning tradition. Now also Yule is an indigenous winter festival that's celebrated by the Germanic peoples. And the earliest reference to Yule is in the form of month names, where the Yuletide period lasts somewhere around 2 months, falling along the end of the modern calendar year between what's now mid-November and early January. And scholars have connected the Yule period to the wild hunt, a ghostly procession in the winter sky. The god Odin, who is attested in Germanic areas as leading the hunt, and increased supernatural activity, such as the wild hunt and the increased activities of Draugr, undead beings who walk the earth. So the events of Yule are generally held and centered on midwinter with feasting, drinking, and sacrifice. And the traditions of the Yule log, the Yule goat, the Yule boar still are reflected in some traditions, like us having ham at Christmas, also singing Yule singing, and others possibly have connections to pre-Christian Yule customs. So I want to play, oh, you know what? I wonder if I will have to reshare because of my sound setting. Jared, do you think I'll have to stop share and reshare in order to play a video with music?
I think maybe.
All right, well, let me do that. And I'll also select optimize for video clip. Would that be a good idea?
Definitely.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot about that part. All right, let's see. I wonder if it will open. Are you seeing that video frame now?
Yes.
Ah, very good. All right, this is called Solstice Carol. Zamira Rowan is the artist.
A fire is burning, the long night draws near. All who need comfort are welcome by here. We'll dance neath the stars and toast the past year. For the spirit of solstice is still living here. We'll count all our blessings while the mother lays down with snow as her blanket covering the ground. Thanks to the mother for the life that she brings. She'll wake on to warm us again in the spring. The poor and the hungry, the sick and the lost, these are our children, no matter the cost. Come by the fire, the harvest to share, for the spirit of solstice is still living here. A fire is burning, the long night draws near. All who need comfort are welcome by here. We'll dance neath the stars and toast the past year. For the spirit of solstice is still living here. The spirit of solstice is still living here.
All right. Beautiful. Now you're seeing my slide again?
Yes.
Thank you, Jared. That was a beautiful song. Thank you, Kat, for finding that. So now the next holiday is Christmas, December 25th. This is a holiday that commemorates the birth of Jesus and celebrated in the Christian church worldwide. So the traditional nativity narrative describes the birth of Jesus to Mary and Joseph in Bethlehem in a stable or a place for animals. That also includes shepherds and wise men from the east, and as well as angels are all part of the story. It also is meant to signal the return of the light. And the tradition of Christmas trees began in medieval Estonia or Latvia and early modern Germany, but also was a custom of pre-Christian traditions, especially pagan. This, our modern idea of Santa Claus is based on folklore traditions surrounding St. Nicholas, who was a 4th century bishop who was known for his generous gifts to the poor. Now, in modern days, of course, as we all know by just walking around out in the world, Christmas has become a commercial blockbuster that typically seems to focus more on spending money and can often bring a lot of pressure to, keep up with the Joneses in terms of gifts given. But it doesn't really have to be that way. We can resist this pressure. And so I want to just read one of my favorite quotes for this time of year comes from the book Simple Abundance, A Daybook of Comfort and Joy by Sarah Van Brethnock, which is quite a few years old. But she has this piece of writing, and I think she didn't even know where it came from, so she has it as anonymous. But this writer said, "If as Herod we fill our lives with things and again with things, if we consider ourselves so unimportant that we must fill every moment of our lives with action, when will we have the time to make the long, slow journey across the desert as did the Magi, or sit and watch the stars as did the shepherds, or brood over the coming of the child as did Mary? For each one of us there is a desert to travel, a star to discover, and a being within ourselves to bring to life. Or as I often like to say, if we, like Mary, are open to God's ideas, then we too can birth divinity. From basically the same story, we get the tradition of Epiphany, which is falls in 2024 on January 6th. And so Epiphany is the day after the 12 days of Christmas, so day after Christmas tide. And it's traditionally celebrated in Christian churches on the first Sunday of a new year between January 2nd and 8th, but the day actually falls on January 6th. And so this day commemorates the visit of the three magi to the baby Jesus in Bethlehem. In Eastern Christian traditions, it's known as a theophany, or a revelation of God incarnate in Jesus. The eve of this feast is Twelfth Night, which of course is a play by Shakespeare. It's said in the story that the three magi who traveled from the east, who, will sing the song "We Three Kings," think of them as kings, but they might have been better understood as kind of like shamans or, wise men, magi, and so mystics maybe even. And so in the story, traditionally, on their way to Bethlehem, they visited with King Herod, and King Herod wanted them to come back and tell him, supposedly in the story, where they had found the child so that he could go kill this perceived rival to his kingship. But they were warned in a dream and went home by a different way. They brought gifts, supposedly of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, in which we think now that think of them as symbolizing gold, symbolizing kingship, frankincense symbolizing deity, and myrrh symbolizing death. So as I said, the magi are sometimes understood as kings, but also sometimes seen as astronomer priests. Catholic devotional writer Edward Hayes notes in his A Pilgrim's Almanac that this day, Epiphany, is a day to honor the great star that led the Magi to the Christ child. It's a day to, quote, bring peace and a blessing to your home, and to ponder the larger home in which you live, our galaxy, which is located in that vast and awesome neighborhood of the universe. So he suggests a ritual where on Epiphany we might step outside that evening and look up at the over 200 billion stars that blaze in beauty in our galaxy alone. The splendor of it should cause you to pray, as did the Magi, in adoration of God. So, for example, the first verse of the song "We Three Kings" says, "We three kings of Orient are, bearing gifts we traverse afar, field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star." And then the refrain says, "O star of wonder, star of light, star with royal beauty bright, westward leading, still proceeding, guide us to thy perfect light." The next holiday is Kwanzaa, which runs from December 26th to January 1st. And it is an annual celebration of African American culture in that period of time. And it culminates in a communal feast called Karamu, which is usually on the 6th day. And Kwanzaa was created by an activist named Maulana Karenga, and it was based on African harvest festival traditions from various parts of West and Southeast Africa. And it was first celebrated in 1966. Now, he created Kwanzaa during the aftermath of the Watts riots as a specifically African American holiday. And he said his goal was to give Blacks an alternative to the existing holiday of Christmas, and to give Blacks an opportunity to celebrate themselves and their history rather than simply imitate the practice of the dominant society, end quote. So for Karenga, who was a major figure in the Black Power movement of the 1960s and 70s, the creation of these holidays were part of a cultural revolution that he saw as giving identity, purpose, and direction to his community. And he felt like the name, took the name Kwanzaa from the Swahili phrase Matunda ya Kwanzaa, meaning first fruits. And first fruits festivals exist in Southern Africa, and they're typically celebrated in December and January with the Southern solstice. And Karenga was partly inspired by an account that he read of the Zulu festival Umkosi Wakwashwama. And it was decided to spell the holiday's name Kwanzaa with an additional A at the end, so that it would have a symbolic 7 letters. And during the early years, he had said that it was meant to be an alternative to Christmas. But later, he kind of had to accept the fact that many people just chose to celebrate both. So Kwanzaa celebrates what its founder called the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, or Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles of African heritage. And they were developed in 1965, a year before Kwanzaa itself. And these 7 principles are all Swahili words, and together comprise the Kawaida, or common philosophy, a synthesis of nationalist, Pan-Africanist, and socialist values. Now, I have the 7 principles listed only in English there, but I will say the Swahili words when I describe each one. So the first is umoja, or unity. And the principle is to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, the nation, and the race. The second, self-determination, the Swahili word is kujichagulia, to define and name ourselves, as well as to create and speak for ourselves. The third principle is ujima, which is collective work and responsibility. And the idea is to build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems, and to solve them together. The fourth principle is ujamaa, or cooperative economics. The idea is to build and maintain our own stores, shops, and other businesses, and to profit from them together. The fifth is nia, or purpose, which is to make our collective vocation the building and developing of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness. The sixth is kuumba, or creativity, to do always as much as we can in the way we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited it. And the seventh is imani, or faith, to believe with all our hearts in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. And so the symbols of Kwanzaa include candles and a candle holder, crops, especially corn, unity cup, and then giving gifts, and homes can often be decorated with kente cloth. Next, we come to New Year's Eve, which December 31st, of course. And so it's the last day of the year, and it's often celebrated with dancing and eating and drinking and fireworks. Now, the Line Islands, which are part of Kiribati and Tonga in the Pacific Ocean, are the first places to welcome the new year, while American Samoa, Baker Island, and Howland Island, part of the United States minor outlying islands, are among the last. Now, the tradition of New Year's Rockin' Eve is a significant one that I remember for most of my life, and its creator and namesake was the entertainer Dick Clark, who conceived New Year's Rockin' Eve as a younger skewing competitor to Guy Lombardo's popular and long-running New Year's Eve big band broadcasts on CBS. I think I remember those also for a very young child. So the Dick Clark special first aired on December 31st, 1972. And its first two editions were broadcast by NBC and hosted by Three Dog Night and George Carlin, respectively, with Clark anchoring coverage from Times Square. In 1974 and 5, the program moved to its current home of ABC, and then Clark assumed the role of host. So following the death of Guy Lombardo and the decline of CBS's specials, New Year's Rockin' Eve grew in popularity and really became ingrained in pop culture, prompting Clark himself to make appearances on other programs in parodies of his role. New Year's Rockin' Eve has consistently remained the highest rated New Year's Eve special broadcast by the United States major television networks. Its 2012 edition peaked at 22.6 million home viewers, not including viewers watching from public locations, which were not measured by Nielsen at the time. Now, New Year's Eve is also marked by the tradition of singing the song Auld Lang Syne, which is based on a poem written by Robert Burns in 1788. And the poem's Scots title may be translated into standard English as something like Old Long Since, or less literally, long, long ago, days gone by, times long past, or old times. So consequently, for Auld Lang Syne, as it appears in the first line of the chorus, might be loosely translated as for the sake of old times. And so it goes like this. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot in the days of Auld Lang Syne? For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll drink a cup of kindness yet for the sake of Auld Lang Syne. And I actually, what year was it? 1980 maybe or so, was in Times Square on New Year's Eve, and that was quite the experience. And I believe this is our last holiday we'll talk about, which is Lunar New Year, which falls on January 10th in 2024. And it is one of the most important celebrations of the year among East and Southeast Asian cultures, including Chinese, Vietnamese, and Korean communities, among others. And the New Year celebration, it's usually celebrated for multiple days, not just one day, as we do typically in the Gregorian calendar's New Year. So, like I said, in 2024, it'll begin January 10th. And it's tied to the lunar calendar, obviously. The holiday began as a time for feasting and to honor household and heavenly deities as well as ancestors. The new year typically begins with the first new moon that occurs between the end of January and spans the first 15 days of the first month of the lunar calendar until the full moon arrives. Now, each year in the lunar calendar is represented by one of 12 zodiac animals included in the cycle of 12 stations or signs along the apparent path of the sun through the cosmos. So the 12 zodiac animals are the rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, sheep, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. And in addition to the animals, 5 elements of earth, water, fire, wood, and metal are also mapped onto the traditional lunar calendar. So each year is associated with an animal that corresponds to an element. So 2024 is the year of the dragon. I don't know what the element is for that year, though. Each culture celebrates the Lunar New Year differently, with various foods and traditions that typically symbolize prosperity, abundance, and togetherness. And in preparation for Lunar New Year, houses are thoroughly cleaned to rid them of inauspicious spirits, which might have collected during the old year. So cleaning is also meant to open space for goodwill and good luck. Some households will hold rituals to offer food and paper icons to ancestors. Others post red paper and banners inscribed with calligraphy messages of good health and good fortune in front of and inside their homes. Elders give out envelopes containing money to children, and then there's often foods made from glutinous rice, which are commonly eaten, as these foods represent togetherness. Other foods symbolize prosperity, abundance, and good luck. Chinese New Year is thought to date back to the Shang dynasty in the 14th century BCE under the Emperor Wu of Han, which was between 140 and 87 BCE. The tradition of carrying out rituals on the first day of the Chinese calendar year began. In 1949, Communist Party leader Mao Zedong forbade its celebration, but more recently it's been restored. Among Chinese cultures, fish is typically included as a last course of a New Year's Eve meal for good luck. And in the Chinese language, the pronunciation of fish is the same as that for the word surplus or abundance, which I guess is why these are linked together. Chinese New Year's meals also feature foods like glutinous rice ball soup, moon-shaped rice cakes, which is a New Year's cake, and dumplings. Sometimes a clean coin is tucked inside a dumpling for good luck. So the holiday concludes with the Lantern Festival, which is celebrated on the last day of New Year's festivities. Parades, dances, games, and fireworks mark the finale of the holiday. And San Francisco's annual Chinese New Year parade is said to be the largest outside of Asia. So before we leave our slides and go to some open sharing, I want to share something written by Bridget Anna McNeil. And I love this artwork here, which is artwork by Jessica Bowman. So this is the writing by Bridget Anna McNeil. The winter solstice time is no longer celebrated as it once was, with the understanding that this is a period of descent and rest, of going within our homes, within ourselves, and taking in all that we have been through, all that has passed in this full year, which is coming to a close. Like nature and the animal kingdom around us, this time of hibernation is so necessary for our tired limbs, our burdened minds. Our modern culture teaches avoidance at a max at this time. Alcohol, lights, shopping, overworking, overspending, comfort food, and consumerism. And yet the natural tug to go inwards, as nearly all creatures are doing, is strong, and the weather so bitter that people are left feeling that winter is hard, because for those of us without burning fires and big festive families, it can be lonely and isolating. Whereas in actual fact, winter is kind. She points us in her quiet, soft way towards our inner self, towards this annual time of peace and reflection, embracing the darkness and forgiving, accepting, and loving, embracing goodbye the past year. Winter takes away the distractions, the buzz, and presents us with the perfect time to rest and withdraw into a womb like love, bringing fire and light to our hearth. And then just around the corner, the new year will begin again, and like a seed planted deep in the earth, we will all rise with renewed energy once again to dance in the sunlight.